The Titanic, built in 1,200 days, sank in just 2 hours. April 10, 1912 was the day when the world's largest and most expensive ship, the Titanic, was ready to embark on its maiden voyage. The Atlantic Ocean was in full swing that day and there was no chance of a hurricane. Passengers were also on board, and people were waiting for the start of the Titanic's voyage. Neither the passenger nor the millions of people bidding farewell knew that 6 mistakes had been made in the construction of the ship which was about to depart. Viewers, in this video you will learn about the 6 biggest mistakes of the most expensive and most powerful ship of its time, which if not done today is not because of the sinking of the Titanic but because of its success. After all, what are the mistakes that were made that even the captain of a ship with 40 years of experience, Edward Smith, did not see? Apart from the captain's 40 years of experience, these mistakes were not noticed by the company operating the Titanic, the White Star Line, which had the experience to operate 107 ships. And these mistakes were not even noticed by Harland & Wolff, the company that built the Titanic. Who invented the 500 ships just before the Titanic? Work on the Titanic began in 1960 and was completed 3 years later with the help of 2,000 workers. The ship was fully ready but the testing phase was remained. Titanic builders' confidence in the Titanic was strengthened when the Titanic successfully passed its first test. Passed the test. It has been marketed in newspapers all over the world with the title Unsinkable Titanic. That is, a ship was built that will never sink. The ship's first voyage was to depart from a city in England called Southampton, which was scheduled for April 10, 1912, with the destination being New York City, USA. The cost of traveling in the economy portion of Titanic was $30, while the cost of traveling in first class was $150. As a result of this marketing, all the tickets will be booked at once, and finally the day has come when Titanic was about to make its maiden voyage. Mistake number 1. At 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the Titanic began its maiden voyage, and at the same time, the Titanic's faults began to surface. Captain Smith had received a deadline from the owners to arrive in New York within 7 days, in any case, on April 17th, due to which Captain had kept the speed of the ship fast from the beginning, and this was exactly the first mistake of the Titanic. Captain Smith had to arrive as soon as possible due to instructions and pressure from his owners, as this was the first voyage of the Titanic. Any machine car or ship in the world has its own operating system, in which speed limit is also a part of this operating system, and that part was violated at the beginning of the voyage of Titanic and shortly after the ship Southampton. The port of Pa was so far behind that in the distance nothing but the blue sea could be seen. Mistake number 2. 3 days had passed since the Titanic sailed, with a short stop in France and Ireland. It was the evening of April 14, 2012. There was silence and fog on all sides of the ocean, before which the visibility was reduced considerably. The captain of another boat, which was about 1 hour ahead from Titanic, sent wireless warning about the icebergs. Exports believes the warning was issued at least 6 times, but due to the negligence of the wireless operator, he missed the important warning. This was normal for him, but it was another reason for the sinking of the Titanic, because the Titanic was the first luxury ship of its time and had many VIPs in it. Most of Titanic's crew was engaged in the services of VIPs. Mistake number 3. The speed of the ship was also high, and they also missed an important warning. The Titanic was now rapidly advancing towards the icebergs, fearlessly, but the Titanic could still be saved from an accident because the ship's guards were still alert and ready to report any iceberg to the captain at a distance. But they didn't have a thing to look at from a distance, and that thing was a telescope. Yes, telescope. The guards were alert but could not see the iceberg from a distance because they had no tools, and that was the third reason for the sinking of the Titanic. The report of the iceberg was given by the guard to the captain when the ship was right in front of the iceberg. Mistake number 4. Because ships in the Atlantic Ocean face an iceberg that is easily handled by large ships. Perhaps Captain Smith thought so too. Captain Smith ordered the ship's engine to shut down and to change direction. Of course, Captain Smith tried his best to avoid the iceberg, but the distance was so short that it was futile to do anything. The iceberg had now hit the center of the Titanic, but there was still much to hope for. There was hope that the iceberg might not damage the body of the ship and break itself as soon as it collided with the ship. Maybe even if the Titanic's fourth mistake hadn't worked. Experts believe that the rivets on the Titanic's body were made of cast iron, not steel. The job of these rivets is to hold large pieces of iron in pairs. Cast iron is softer than steel. That's why the iceberg hit the part of the Titanic that hit the rivets. And then what Captain Samet was afraid of happened. Mistake number 5. The Titanic crashed into an iceberg as big as a football field. And now the bottom of the ship had begun to fill with water. The tragic accident alerted the entire crew and passengers, as well as the ship's owner, Joseph Bruce. Although the Titanic had begun to fill up with water, there was still hope for the Titanic to survive. Because the Titanic was designed for that. Even if the Titanic's 3 floors were flooded, it would not sink. But unfortunately the water had reached the 4th floor. Now the matter was out of hand and the Titanic was slowly sinking into the ocean. Now it was time to save the lives of the passengers on board without worrying about the ship. Captain Smith issued an emergency alert on the radio. The decision was made to shift the passengers to lifeboats until someone came to help. But on this occasion, the 5th mistake showed its work. Yes, there were a total of 32 lifeboats in the ship, but only 20 bayous were kept due to negligence. There were 1,500 passengers and only 20 boats. Mistake number 6. There was chaos everywhere and everyone wanted to get on those few boats. The first emergency boat landed at 12:45 p.m. But here's the 6th mistake. In a world of chaos, the boats have sunk into the sea without being fully filled, in which most of the first-class passengers were preferred. Those who were richer were seated earlier. And if more passengers were put in the boats, less human life would be lost. Now the ship was sinking at full speed. At 2:18 a.m., all the lights on the Titanic went out due to a short circuit. And the next moment the ship broke up and split in two. And so it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to sink completely into the sea. And so 1,500 people drowned in the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And let me tell you another thing. The water temperature at that time was -2 degrees Celsius. Even if the passengers jumped into the water, there was no chance of escape. Because man cannot survive more than 30 minutes at such a low temperature. The death toll is said to have risen to more than 500 because people familiar with the crew had boarded the plane without tickets. Most of the survivors were children and women. The other side, including the captain, was busy saving lives. And he was the last man to jump off a sinking ship. We hope you will share and like this video of RTIS too.